Hello, everyone. Welcome back to All About America's Team, brought to you by Delahanty Media. It's been a while. We know. We are sorry. I'm Ray Nickens, joined with, as always, by.
Oh, and the Chico.
And we have quite a packed show for y'all today. Because we are sorry, we have 6 segments instead of our typically 4. And we have a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Save very little time. Owen will kind of walk us through what we're going to be discussing, and then we'll just segue right into our first segment.
So Ray and I are gonna kind of talk about what we hope to see happen before training camp, as well as the Dalton Schultz one-day holdout in the off season, as well as how we think that contract is going to go. Also, Dallas getting fined for mini camp and losing an OTA practice next year because of practicing too hard and having too much physicality, which who knows what that means, but that happened. And just a few things that Ray and I, like I said earlier, would just like to see happen before training camp. But the first thing I want to talk about out of the few things I just mentioned was the Dalton Schultz holdout, and I feel like when players get that franchise tag, it's normal for them to hold out. It's normal for guys that want contract extensions, but especially under the franchise, to hold out to try to get as much money as possible. And I feel like the first mistake that Dalton made and his agency made was sign the contract. And sure, Dallas could give him a contract extension now and it'd be a lot cheaper. And I believe the deadline for that is Friday. So hopefully they will re-sign him and the cap hit will be cheaper for 2022. But as soon as he signed that contract, he lost all of his leverage because he's already under contract for this year. And basically now he's just working for either a contract extension from Dallas or a brand new contract from another team that would be in use of his services. So I think it's kind of funny that he was wanting to hold out because it only lasted a day. It was the last day of, I believe, minicamp. And I didn't really understand it because there's really nothing he's gonna do because Jerry and Steven have they already resigned. They already have him for the year, so there's no rush to resign him. But Ray, what are your thoughts on the Dalton Schultz, I guess, air quote drama?
Well, there's a lot of things that circle my mind when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys and the offseason. And that's without even acknowledging Dalton Schultz. You have the free agency period of certain ageless depression with the lack of signing of veteran leadership / professional Super Bowl caliber players. But we can throw that out the window and not discuss it and just talk about Mr. Dalton Schultz, the security blanket of one Dak Prescott, who we will also be discussing a little bit later in the show. So stay tuned for that. So I do agree that you are absolutely right in the fact that him signing said contract absolutely prevented him of having any sort of leverage against the Dallas Cowboys front office or football team. And him holding out for a day was not even childish. It was just hilarious. And I don't know if he just did it as a joke or if he had to go play golf and didn't tell anyone and was just wanting to use the holdout thing as an excuse. But the fact that you go in and sign on the dotted line and then wake up the next morning and go, "Oh wait, I just signed a franchise tag. Oh no, I'm not getting a long-term deal. I should hold out." And then you hold out for the last day of minicamp. It's somewhat pathetic and shows a lack of, I guess, discipline, but also he must have not been very informed by his agent because if his agent was good, and I hope he fired his agent, by the way, if his agent was good, he would have said, "Don't sign this contract and hold out because you are the most valuable receiving threat on this team because Dak Prescott feeds you the ball the most." So you are the most important part of this offense, being his most trusted receiver. So you should not sign this contract. But he signed the contract. What is done is done. I don't think Jerry and Steven need to sign him to a long-term extension because you already signed the contract, like you said. So why would you sign him to a long-term extension? And why would he even take less money? Like, if he's going to get paid more money for 1 year, why would he go for 3 years and get less money than he would in 1 year?
No,
So
I meant like the guaranteed money would be more, but just like the cap hit for this year would be lower. And honestly, who knows if even would be, because after David Njoku got that ridiculous extension from Cleveland, I don't even know what his price tag would be. Because David, I'll have to look at the numbers, but I would assume that Dalton, just based off of longevity with a quarterback, obviously, Dalton is more valuable to Dak than David would be to Jacoby Brissett or Deshaun if he plays. So
yeah, I mean, it just goes into the whole thing of why would Jerry Jones or Steven Jones restructure a contract with a player who has no leverage to demand a long-term extension?
yeah,
So that's kind of what I was trying to get at. But
yeah,
I
you're 100% right.
I ultimately think that Dalton Schultz will play football this year. He will most likely play football for under that franchise tag, and he will most certainly be the most consistent receiver on their football team for next year because he's going to be he's the tight end who's always who's given the ball. He's the player that Prescott looks to on third downs and key situations. So you can expect him to be the one who's getting the football. And I think he's going to be the most consistent player on the team, on the receiving core. You don't know what's going to happen with CeeDee Lamb, if Michael Gallup's going to even look like whatever we've seen from Michael Gallup when he's played long term. And we have no idea what we're going to get out of the replacement of Amari Cooper, James Washington. We don't know what we're going to get out of the rookie class, which we will discuss a little bit later. The receiver, especially out of the rookie class from South
Jalen
Alabama.
Colbert. Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of question marks, and especially Mr. Ezekiel Elliott, who we think he's running pretty fast. That's what they tell us, but we don't know what we're going to see out of him. So you can expect Dalton Schultz to be the one player that we absolutely know will do his job on the receiving core, and that's about it. But as for his contract and his holdout, it was just more of a hilarious event that occurred for a day, and that everyone kind of forgot.
Yeah, definitely. I never really understood why he would do that, but talking, I guess, about talking about Dalton Schultz, I just remembered this. Dak and company, well, besides CD and Zeke recently, as a group, they are not one to post their workouts to social media. But Ray sent this to me a while ago. Dak posted a picture, and it was of him and a bunch of the other receivers. And I was looking at it, and I was like, "Where's Zeke?" And Dak added Zeke and was like in the bathroom. And Ray and I for 5 minutes was trying to figure out that whole thing. But also, Dak took the receiving core on a trip. I forget where they went.
Hopefully Cabo.
He mentioned that he was able to
or Cancun, either one.
Hopefully, he said that somewhere exotic. Hopefully, he said that he was able to have or create a connection with some of the guys that he would not have been able to if it were not for this trip. And one guy that I definitely think he's going to have a connection with early is Jalen Tolbert, just because of him just because of Dak sending him the playbook right after he was drafted, even though Ray kind of questioned stuff like that. But I like just because it showed leadership and things of that nature. But I think the trip was definitely something that was good, even though you're not really going to see any You're not going to see anything like Russell Wilson put out with the Broncos of throwing to Jerry Jeudy, which I like. I'm not really a big fan of teams just throwing out workout videos with a quarterback who has no one in his face and wide receivers who just get to run freely, because all that does is just create hype, but it doesn't do anything. But I believe that was everything that we wanted to cover in the beginning before we get into the meat of the show.
Meat is good.
Yes.
One quick point of reference. What I thought is very important and shows growth is the fact that Dak Prescott went on a trip with his receiving corps.
Yes.
Eli Manning, when he was the starting quarterback for the New York Giants, went on a trip with his receiving corps known as the receiver workouts, where every year when he was a starting quarterback post his first year, he took all the receivers on a trip to just do extensive routes, workouts, blah 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 blah. What does that do? Well, it addresses two things that we also learn in sales, by the way. You have the attention aspect, which is we are paying attention to the problem, which is we don't have good chemistry. We are addressing the pain that it causes our team. We lose football games. And we are providing a solution. This is actually three things. We provide a solution by practicing together. And building a personal relationship as well. Because if you're not friends, then you're not going to perform well. But them going on a trip, spending quality time together, running routes, Dak talking to his receivers saying, "Hey, how are you going to break out of on a post route? How are you going to break on an in route? How are you going to break on a double move? Where do you like the ball? Do you prefer it on the left shoulder or the right shoulder? Do you like to line up on the right side or the left? What's your favorite route? Blah, 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 blah." This helps your hot routes. This helps a late game 2-minute drill. And this just has everyone is on the same page when you go and do these things. And I think what has hurt the Cowboys in the past under Dak Prescott is they have relied too much on conventional off-season training camp under the umbrella of either Jason Garrett, Jerry Jones, or Mike McCarthy, and going on this little one-on-one sesh where it's been just the players. They're able to work on their own pace, by their own rules, at their own time. They hopefully have been able to build solid chemistry. And to be honest, I don't even know why Ezekiel Elliott was even on the trip, considering he runs the football and doesn't catch the football.
I believe they were two different trips. One of them was just at a practice facility, and the second was to like an actual vacation spot.
Well, that means that is very great news, because Ezekiel Elliott needs to be running in Cabo sand, as one Skip Bayless reference. But anyway, I thought I was very happy to hear that Mr. Prescott took his receivers on a trip to Cancun, Cabo, Hawaii, wherever. And hopefully they did a little route running. Who knows? But I was happy to see that he spent some time with his boys. Hopefully it translates into early season wins. But this opening early season is going to be challenging. So we will see if this trip pays off in those first 5-6 weeks. But I think it might, which is a little bit more optimism that you'll see from me typically. But anyway, we can move on.
Yeah, who knows? It'll be interesting to see when Gallup decides to return. I don't think it'll happen until week 8 or 9, maybe 10, which is fine, because you're not going to want to rush back a guy who tore his ACL, especially when you have people that are behind him on the depth chart that have had experience behind Dak, obviously besides James Washington. But moving on to the next of our segments, we will be talking about what to expect this year from our sophomores, which is the Micah Parsons draft class, as well as what to expect from the rookie draft class, and kind of going into a boom or bust thing. And I'm going to give Ray some the 2021 draft class, and we're gonna go back and forth to see if they're gonna if their success, if they're gonna have the same type of season or a much better season, or if they're gonna have a little bit of a decline. And the same for the rookie, just saying if we think they're gonna have an impact and what kind of impact, or kind of just be on the bench. And maybe Ray and I will talk about what side of the bench they'll be on. The left, right, center. Who knows? But
I like the way you think.
it doesn't happen often, but thank you. So, coming off of the 2021 draft class, what do you think will happen to the linebacker from Penn State, Micah Parsons?
Well,
do you think he will reflect and have the same season, better season? Because he said he's looking for 20 plus sacks. He's coming for TJ Watt. So what do you think will happen to Mr. 11? Also, happy 7-Eleven day to Trayvon and Micah. Micah is the lion and Trayvon is the eagle. So happy 7-Eleven day. Just had to throw that in there.
AKA, if you go to your local 7-Eleven, you can get your burnt toast and your free icy. You can decide which one is which. But
Hey,
that is my joke of the day. Yeah, so I am tempted to go into a soliloquy that I was going to save for a segment later on in the show, but I will ultimately save it for later. I think the interesting thing about Micah Parsons that is very different from past linebackers of recent memory is he is not only saying he wants to be better and he wants this and this and this, he's actually showing you. He backed up his claims. Like, he backed up a lot from his rookie year, where he basically picked up the entire defensive squad and carried them. What's a good analogy? Have you ever seen the movie Facing the Giants, Owen?
no, I have not.
Okay, well,
I will have to get on that tonight.
There is a scene where the football coach has the leader of the defense blindfolded and carry, I guess, the lightest person on the team across the field in a bear crawl. And that's basically what Micah Parsons had to do with the Dallas defense. But anyway, I do think that we will see a very – this is a hard one, because I don't think that we should expect Micah Parsons to improve on his historically great rookie year.
He did put up 13 sacks. So that is a measurement to where you think.
I do think that where I want to see Micah Parsons grow is not rushing the passer and playing the run, because I think he does those fine. I want to see him grow in the passing game. I want to see him develop into a more true linebacker that can rush the passer, because if he can do more than one thing very, very well, then it's going to be a lot harder for defenses to scheme against him, because what defenses are doing right now is they're in the defensive coordinators, I should say. They're in the film room and they're watching tape of Micah Parsons, and they're coming up with ways to either fool him, contain him, or just completely remove him from any aspect of the game. So Micah Parsons improving his true linebacking ability, which is coverage, playing side to side, calling out defenses, or not defenses, offensive schemes, etc. Then it's going to be a lot harder for defenses to match up with him. And we can start getting into the more comparisons of him and other players then. But I don't really care, and I'm not really worried about him rushing the passer, because I think he's going to generate double-digit sacks. But I want him to improve his other aspects of his game this offense and offseason, and focus on improving those instead of trying to, work on his swim moves and his bull rush and all those great Madden terms that I've learned, and trying to sack the quarterback more. So that's what I expect out of Micah Parsons, without really answering your question.
Give me 1 second just to find his double team rate, because I believe that he had one of the higher double team rates. I
So
will find it at some point
what's
in time.
interesting about double teaming a linebacker is he's a lot quicker than the average defensive
No,
end or
I just meant
defensive
like
tackle.
when he was on the end, when he was like playing edge, that he had one of the higher. I completely understand what you're saying, but I was just saying, like, I just meant to, like, when he was on the edge, I believe, I have to get the number, but I believe that he was up there in one of the higher rates of being double teamed.
And I'm sure he was, because he was a offensive scheme killer. Because he was a linebacker who was fast and quick and could get by strong offensive linemen.
This is true.
Not strong as in weight. I mean as strong as in solid, solidified offensive line.
100%. I do agree with. I do think that he will have. It depends on where they play him. I do think that they're going to move him all around, but unlike I'm not going to assume how you feel, but I do think that one thing that he was knocked for at Penn State was his coverage. But I'll go back to the play against the Giants where he was lined up as a cornerback, and it was like a 20-yard, just either go, long fade, whatever you want to call it, like route-wise. It was a go, and he stayed. It might have been Kenny Galladay. I forget. But he stayed with him hip to hip. And whether you want to, people, I'm going to assume that Giants fans call this some type of defensive pass interference, but he held his own. Sure, in the first few weeks, you could probably pick plays that he was picked on, but I think that as the season went by and he was more confident in his own abilities, I do think that his pass coverage play was not as bad as personally I believed it was going to be coming out of Penn State. But I do believe that he could be a 15 plus sack guy if he ends up playing a predominant defensive edge role. But also with Jibril Cox coming back fully healthy, hopefully by week 1, I do think that he will have a lot more freedom to play in whatever role Dan Quinn lays out for him. But I do think that he will be able to improve, because he was not a full-time defensive end until 4 or 5 games into the year, and that's really when he picked off, like he took off, and people realized how good he was. But I'm looking forward to just a full season of a smarter Micah, and I do think that he is looking forward to going up against Mr. Brady again, and I think we are all looking forward to Dallas going up against the Buccaneers. But I think Micah, along with other players, would like to get back at them for losing last year. But long story short, I do think that Micah will either have a more consistent 17 game stretch, because obviously he was slow because he was a rookie. But I do think that he will have around 15 plus sacks if he is a predominant defensive end. But long story short, I believe he will have a better year.
So here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that the Cowboys are going to do what the Cowboys always do, and they are going to turn Micah Parsons, who is a very versatile player, who, if you work with him and you teach him and coach him and allow him to improve, he can become a full jack of all trades linebacker who can beat you 5-10 different ways on the football field. My fear is Dan Quinn is going to stick him on the edge 99% of the time, because Jerry Jones says Micah Parsons on the edge sells tickets, and he's going to get turned into a pass rusher. And the problem with that is you can scheme an offense to shut out a pass rusher just by doing one simple thing: go the opposite direction. So Micah Parsons, I'm not saying he's not going to be effective being a pass rusher, because he's regardless of whether or not you try and scheme around him, he's going to make plays. But if you take away his impact in other areas because you want him to rush the passer 99% of the time, then you're going to limit his long-term growth as a player for a more short-term run that I ultimately don't think is going to be fruitful just because of the state of the football team. So if you're focusing more long-term, it allows for whether or not the coaching staff changes, whether or not the offense changes, whatever happens, you're not allowing for the player to grow long term. You're more is focusing more on his short term aspect to the football team, which I don't think is a good way to put it. I mean, it allowed for players like Jalen Smith. He relied on his instinct in his first year and some of his second year. And then all of a sudden, his instinct wasn't good enough because teams were scheming on how to trick him and fool him and go around him. And he looked a little bit more foolish every game. Not saying his injury didn't have anything to do with that, but it was a lot more because teams were actually scheming how to take him out of the game by using his instinct against him. And I think you could do that with Parsons, because Parsons is a very similar player in which he reads and reacts very quickly. So if you're going to use that to his disadvantage, you're going to have more success if he's just playing one aspect of defense, which is, long story short, what I'm trying to say. But I do think he's going to be a good player and he's going to have a great year. But I don't want it to be just because he's rushing the passer. So I'm not really focused on him getting 20 sacks or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'd rather him have 4 interceptions than 20 sacks.
Yeah, I definitely do think that he's looking forward to getting some interceptions. I think that as long as Dan Quinn is the defensive coordinator, and maybe he'll be the head coach in a year, but there is a reason why. I believe that the main reason Dan Quinn stayed is because of Micah, and the only reason why Micah played so much defensive end is because of DeMarcus Lawrence's breaking his foot. If that never happened, who knows what type of Micah Parsons we would have right now. But as soon as Micah came back and there was more bodies in the defensive line, you saw Micah move around more. And he was able to play more of just like see ball, get ball. And I do think you're right. If you keep him at defensive end, you're doing him a disservice. But I don't foresee Dan Quinn, as big as you can get mad at him for the Super Bowl loss and for blowing the game against Dallas in 2019, 2020. His best years as a coach were on the defensive line. And I believe that he has not given me a reason to not trust him. And I do not foresee, especially with the depth that Dallas has on the defensive line, with Dante Fowler Jr., who Dan Quinn loves, I definitely believe that Michael will move around a lot. But honestly, no one's really going to know until we start playing games. But as of right now, I do not believe that'll happen.
Yeah, but let's quickly move on before we have to cut this segment short.
Kelvin Joseph, the most interesting of the I wouldn't say interesting, just the most what's the right word? The most complex rookie or sophomore. Yes, Kelvin has his fair share of off the field or one off the field issue, and who knows if he'll even play for the first few games. But I do think that this year he is, especially with training camp and the preseason, I believe that he is fighting for that second cornerback role. It'll either be him or Anthony Brown. I believe that Trayvon Diggs has cemented himself as the cornerback one, and I think the second. Well, I thought last offseason, that Kelvin was gonna fight for the second cornerback role, but then he had his fair share of injuries going into the season, and sometimes he just didn't play. I wish he played more, but I do think that this year is the year that he gets more playing time and fights for that second corner role, with Jordan Lewis being the slot guy, which is where I think he should be. So either you have Kelvin Joseph as your number 2 corner, and then Anthony Brown as your number 4 or non-slot corner, your third outside guy. And Anthony Brown, I thought, had a pretty good year, besides obviously like him getting beaten up on in the Raiders game, and some of those penalties were a little questionable, but they landed how they landed. Or Anthony Brown wins the job and Kelvin Joseph is a darn decent second year guy to have in your secondary. But honestly, I have no idea what to expect from him, because I don't even know if he'll be playing for close to a third of the year. Well, if he's going to miss a third of the year. So if he plays, I do think that he'll be. I'd like to say that he'd be serviceable. So I'm going to put the serviceable tag to his name as of right now.
So if all goes according to plan, which is Anthony Brown does not lose the job to Mr. Kelvin Joseph, who found himself in a vehicle, unfortunately, he got into the wrong vehicle on a certain night, and I believe April. But if everything goes well, then Anthony Brown keeps his job, which he for sure should keep his job, because one, he did have a decent year despite all of the wonderful clips I found on YouTube/Instagram of him getting double moved to death. He had a solid year. He had his best coverage stats of his career last year. I don't think there's a very high possibility that Kelvin Joseph does not see significant playing time as a Dallas Cowboy this year. And then all of a sudden you reach your third year and we're having questions on whether or not they should just get rid of Kelvin Joseph altogether and try to get some compensation. Because right now, as they sit, they have Trayvon Diggs, who's not going anywhere, Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, who proved to be serviceable, and I believe they have Nahshon Wright as well, who they drafted in this last year's class, so he's still on the team, and they drafted a corner,
Daron Bland, I believe it is his name.
Daron Bland this past draft. So they have a lot of corners on this team, and it begs the question on whether or not they want to deal with Mr. Joseph, who likes to rap a lot as well. Not saying that affects his play in the football field, but it's just another off the field hobby that he has. So it's really like, with all this interesting news that did come into the spotlight a couple months ago, it's very interesting because I thought Kelvin Joseph was going to play a lot last season before he had his groin injury that kept him out for a significant part of the year. And now all of a sudden he has this off the field issue, and it's bringing the case where he might not even play much this year, and maybe might not play very much for the Cowboys overall, and might turn into a wasted pick. So I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to say that Kelvin Joseph plays, but is not a negative or positive impact when he's on the field. He's just a body.
It's a very safe pick. I don't know if I like it.
Well, if Anthony Brown does what he does, and Jordan Lewis does what he does, and Trayvon Diggs does what he does, then I don't think there's much need for Anthony Brown on the field.
Well, Kelvin, it's still good to have a fourth corner. And with Unless the only other corner on this team who's played is Kyron Brown. I do believe him getting some play out there, and also C.J. Goodwin, but he is mainly a special teams guy. So after that pick, we have Osa Odigizua from UCLA, and we'll go two by two because after the first two, the rest there's a lot of them. So Osa and Chauncey, they both had good years. Chauncey, I believe that Chauncey got better as the year went on. He was involved in the block punt for a touchdown. I forget against who. Memory's awful.
Probably the Washington football team, who
I
are now the
don't
Washington
think it was them.
Commanders.
I forget who it was. But Chauncey, I believe going into it will definitely be just a rotational guy, and if he plays better, then go Cowboys. But if he doesn't, then they have other bodies. But Osa will definitely be a big guy in the middle who will either play next to or play for snaps behind Neville Gallimore. So I definitely there was a video that or picture that they posted, and both of them look
Fit.
Yes, very fit. I'll put it this way: they definitely have grown into their athlete bodies, and that's only going to help your team because it's good to have strength. And obviously, as a defensive lineman, defensive tackle, the stronger you are, the easier you'll be able to get through double teams, and the easier you'll make it for your linebackers to run through. So, honestly, for Chauncey, I really don't know how much he'll be playing besides behind because he is the he's a little behind on the depth chart. So I have no idea what type of, obviously in preseason we'll see him play and hopefully he gets a lot of run. But Osa, I definitely think out of those two will be the better. I believe that he'll have the better of the two seasons because he'll probably get more playing time.
Yeah. So what I think is amazing that the Dallas Cowboys have done is they have really stocked their defensive line, which I think is almost the most important aspect of your defense is having a consistent, solidified defensive line that is a threat in the pass and as well as the run. I think both players are going to be a serviceable contribution to that defensive line. I think the Osa is going to play more, but I do see both of them contributing. And I think it's just overall great because while they're probably not going to play much on the edge, that they are going to be involved in that in the trenches part aspect of the line, and they're going to be more solidified as run stopping players. And I think where the Cowboys have struggled in the past, they're going to be much better, which is going to be stopping the run, and that's going to be a huge factor to them, as well as the other players on the defensive line, defensive tackle, interior spots. But I think they're both going to be positive contributions, and I think there's a chance that you could see the Cowboys defensive line being their strongest unit of the defense next year.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when the Eagles, you play them twice a year, and they have the best offensive line and just the best overall rushing team. So going up against them twice a year will definitely tell if, unless Dallas goes up like 4 scores and then you just see Jalen Hurts throwing ducks. But hopefully in the beginning of the game when things are close. No, I do think we'll get into this later. I do think that Philly, those games will be a lot better than they were last year. But hopefully Dallas will be able to play better against them run wise. So I remember last year, early in the year, I was like, yeah, Ray, like the defensive line looks so much better. But then there'd be a few games where they play a much better rushing team, and I'd get like a texted me like, "Oh, so about that rush D," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. You're right." So, but and then going into the end of the third round and your first fourth round pick, you have Desean Wright and Jibril Cox. I do think that Jibril Cox will get a lot more playing time, based upon how he played in that 1 or 2 games before he unfortunately tore his knee. And Desean Wright, I got no clue. I honestly have. Hopefully he'll be a good special teams guy. He is. A lot of people thought that he was a reach just because no one had him on their radar for the fourth round. Third round. Sorry, but that was a Dan Quinn pick going back to his times in Seattle. Bigger corners that had big arm span, whatever the name is. Wingspan. There you go. It's been a long day. Which you have a good wingspan. So hopefully he plays, but he didn't really get all that much time last season. So hopefully this year he has more time in him. But I do think that out of the two, Jibril Cox will have a much bigger. Out of the two of them will have a much bigger impact.
We agree. Jibril Cox is going to have a very, very uptick of momentum his sophomore season. I think he's going to play a lot on the defense. Can't say the same about Desean Wright. He did not play very much on the defense. He played special teams. What I hope to see from him is that he improves in training camp and the preseason, where they don't feel the liability of throwing him out there in certain situations in coverage. However, it is a lot more likely that Desean Wright stays on the special teams, and that Jibril Cox is playing in the middle of the defense at that linebacker spot. I do see there being a chance where Jibril Cox is playing the mic, calling out the signals, letting Parsons play the will, and just playing edge and outside linebacker. And that allows Vander Esch to inevitably get hurt more than once.
Don't say
or
that.
need to take a break or just sit out for a couple games.
You can say his back. He may have some back soreness, some all those wolves he'll be killing.
Maybe a tightened hamstring.
Yeah, maybe from getting on one knee to shoot, but I will not wear the jersey at all this year, so I will not be jinxing anyone.
But not to say that Vander Esch is not a contributional piece. I think that his time as a starting player on this team is very limited, if not over. And I would like to see by mid-season or even a quarter of the season of Cox and Parsons as the two linebackers on the field. So that is my hope and desire for Jibril Cox. And as for Desean Wright, I'm just going to declare my opinion on him as undecided.
And maybe also we'll see some Damone Clark if he comes back at all this year. That would definitely be good to see him in there. But after that, there are 5 picks, and you have Josh Ball, Simi Foko, Quentin Bohanna, Israel Mukwamu, and Matt Farnock. And the players that I'll kind of go based off of what I feel. Josh Ball, I do not think will play at all this year. I think that he'll get another basically redshirt year, get a lot of time in the preseason and just go from there. Simi, I think out of this whole draft class, he will be the turning point, I believe, especially with Michael Gallup being out the first. I have no idea. He will need to step up, and I think that obviously CeeDee Lamb will play well. James Washington, I believe, will have a good year. And then obviously he may fall off a little bit once Gallup comes back. And then you have Jalen Tolbert, who hopefully if his connection with Dak is as good as everyone hopes it'll be, he can have a really good rookie year. But I think that Simi, he'll get a lot of playing time, and I think that the consistency of the offense may lie on his shoulders. And then after him, Quentin Bohanna, again, I don't, like Ray was saying, with the depth of this defensive line, hopefully he plays more. Israel Mukwamu, he might be a practice squad guy. I believe he was on and off the practice squad last year, maybe just be a special teams guy. And Matt Farnock might be the starting center next year. So that is the last five. That is what I have to say. I feel like Matt Farnock and Simi are definitely the two out of the guys. Those could definitely be the two most impactful out of the back end.
So the guy I think that Josh Ball is not going to play much. I do agree with that. So we can address him later on towards the closer to the starting of the season and kind of figure out where he is on their roster. I disagree that Simi is going to be a huge piece of the receiving core. I would like him to contribute, but I don't think he's going to be the determining factor of their success.
I just meant like consistency, because in the beginning of the year he's gonna play, and I'm not saying like the offense is gonna go as far as he takes them, but CD in the beginning is obviously going to get a lot of attention, and you're going to have guys in the back end. So that's all I was. I didn't mean that he's going to be this like top 5 wide receiver or anything like that.
Well, yeah. I think that Dalton Schultz and Tolbert are going to be more influential on the success of the football team than Semi. While I think that it's important that he does his job, I don't think he's gonna have that big of a influence on their success. But I would like to see him play well when he's on the field, because I do think, like, I do agree with you that he's going to play. But I'd like to see him do well and be successful. As for Bohanna, if he plays, I hope he plays well, but I mean, I don't see a lot of playing time for him on the defensive line. And that is a good thing, because it means that we're a very strong unit, that we're not playing everybody. Yeah. I do think he will be on the field at some points, but I don't think that he'll have that big of a role. What's interesting about Israel Mukwamu is that their safety room is not very deep. So I could see a scenario where he plays more than you think on the defensive, in the secondary, which I would honestly be okay with if he has a good offseason and training camp, and I guess preseason as well, because I really wanted the Cowboys to draft a safety or a secondary player, but they did not when I wanted them to, and that's okay. I've accepted it. I moved on. I might not like it, but I have accepted it. So that opens the door for a guy like Israel to play more. And I think if he's in the secondary, that means that he's shown enough in the offseason for me to give him a chance. And I'm just going to say that I think he's going to play more than you expect. As for Mr. Farnick, I don't think he's going to start at center. And hopefully I won't see him at center because Tyler Biotish is going to do his job at the center position, which he was drafted to be the starting center, and so he's going to do his job as the starting center and be effective as the starting center. That way, we don't have to see Mr. Farnick as the starting center,
I like your optimism.
unless, knock on wood, Biotish has to leave the game.
Yeah. Who
But
knows?
that is my opinion of the last four. We can almost call them five nobodies.
The back end. Yeah. So, and then to just wrap up the draft class talk, I just wanted to say who I think out of this Studley 2022 draft class will have the most impactful part of this team. And I think that there are more players on this draft class that will have an impact than I think will not. Tyler Smith, the offensive line is going to go as far as he takes them just because of how young he is and how uneasy the left guard spot has been since 2016. I haven't been confident about a left guard since 2016. And Ron Leary, that was his name. Oh, I missed that man. I remember when he left to go to Denver, and I was sitting in class when free agency hit, and I was internally crying because I knew that the offensive line was going to take a step back. And then you have Sam Williams, who I think will have an impact. What type of impact? Who knows? Jalen Ray and I have talked about that. Jake Ferguson, I think that he'll have an impact being the tight end number 2. And then besides him, I think John Ridgeway, and Ray has talked about how much he likes John Ridgeway out of Arkansas in the past. So those are my 5 players. And Deron Bland, no idea how much he's going to play. Damone Clark will probably be out for like half the year. And then Devin Harper, I don't really know how much she's going to play either. So out of that group, I think those 5 are going to have an impact, and a positive impact, to say that.
The most baffling pick that the Cowboys made in this draft is shockingly not the first 2 picks, which are very baffling. The most baffling is the fact that they drafted a tight end, which I don't very much understand. You have Dalton Schultz as your tight end. I don't really understand why they took Ferguson. Well, maybe I'll figure that out once he actually plays. But I just did not understand the tight end pick there. But I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to just not discuss Tyler Smith. It's going to make me too frustrated. So I'm going to focus on the other people in this draft class. I'm going to talk about Mr. Arkansas himself. I have very high expectations for him playing in the interior of the defensive line. I think he's going to be a very solid contribution, and I think he's going to earn some minutes. Harper, I don't think he's going to play at all this year. He's still recovering from that injury. I think he's going to sit out. I don't have much expectations for him this year, but hopefully he turns into a solid linebacker of the future, which I believe that's what they drafted him for. My biggest hope and dream is that Jalen Tolbert turns out to be a solid wide receiver too, because that allows for the Cowboys to move on from Michael Gallup. Because honestly, let's be real, has Michael Gallup really exceeded the expectations that we put on him from being drafted initially? No. He's been on and off the field. Pick. He's been on and off the field. He hasn't really been that much of a contributor when he's on the field. So I would like Jalen Tolbert to replace him, and I would like us not to have to pay him big money. Which unfortunately
if you cut him,
probably are.
You're going to have to cut him after 2 years, because if you cut him right away, I am pulling up Michael Gallup stats, because that's a conversation I need to have.
I don't think Michael Gallup is that important. Just like I didn't think Amari Cooper was that important.
But they play 2 different positions, like basically. In 2018, he had 500 yards. 2019, he had over 1,000. 2020, he had 800. And last year, while injured, he had 445. And he hasn't played a full season. And he put over 1,000 yards, only playing 14 games and starting 12 of them.
Who has been the most important player on the wide receiving core for the Dallas Cowboys in the last
3 years?
3 years.
If you want to say 3, personally, I think the X factor out of all of those is definitely Michael Gallup, because he, out of any of them, can go up and get a pass. And there have been plenty of catches where he has to go up and is very Des Bryant like. We're going up, and he's not the fastest guy, but I think that out of any wide receiver they have, he probably has the best catching ability. But I think that I personally like him a lot, and I was scared they were going to lose him. And whether the injury cemented him getting re-signed or they wanted to re-sign him in general. But the only issue that I have, if you were to like, and I want to get your opinion on this as well. The only issue that I have with if you get rid of him, then you only have CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert, and your wide receiver number 3 is Noah Brown. Like, what are you going to do?
Well, you would draft another player.
I think that
there are quite a few wide receivers in the upcoming draft that will be studs. And you will use a pick because they ultimately will not all go in the top 10. You will use one of your very incredibly mediocre draft picks that you earned from being a very mediocre football team. God forbid they're not a mediocre, but you use your pick to draft a new receiver to replace him, because my point was not that he is a bad football player. My point was he is a replaceable football player. I do not believe that Michael Gallup has done anything in his career that Jalen Tolbert cannot do in his career. I think CeeDee Lamb is someone that Jalen Tolbert will not be replacing. However, I do think Tolbert can have a better year and do more for the team than Michael Gallup will, who is, if we did forget, not going to play for 4 or 5 games because he hurt himself again. So if Jalen Tolbert can prove that he is 1, consistent, reliable, 2, very durable, stays on the field, and 3, shows up when we need him, aka not Amari Cooper, then I think that the Cowboys will feel a lot more comfortable with getting rid with Gallup sooner rather than later. I'm not saying you get rid of him right immediately. I'm saying that over time, you can let him leave and restock your cupboard with a younger receiver. All of a sudden, you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Tolbert, and then you have Xavier Worthy out of Texas, or another Alabama receiver, or you have someone out of
the OSU
Clemson,
kid,
LSU, USC, whoever you want to pick, whoever you want. You can have whoever you want.
But so you are lucky because he has a potential out, just like Amari did after the 2024 year. So going into that year, so he only has 2022 and 2023.
That is perfect.
And then after, so he has 2 years.
That is perfect because, as I will explain a little bit more later, but that is exactly my test run for players, is that 2-year number. So that is the perfect amount of time for you to assess what you have in Jalen Tolbert and if he is competent enough to be a Michael Gallup 2.0 or even better than Michael Gallup. So Jalen Tolbert is my boom, and I don't even have a bust, but I'm just going to, I'm going to say that Tyler Smith is going to be a project more than he is a competent player. He's going to be a project. He's going to have a lot of growing pains. He's going to drive me crazy. He's ultimately going to drive Owen crazy, even though Owen does not want to admit it right now.
not that.
And I think Sam Williams is going to be okay. And he's going to make the loss of Randy Gregory a lot more easy for some people than it will be for others. But I think that it's important that Sam Williams is solid. If he is solid, that would be fine and good. But I need stardom from Tolbert, because if we don't have stardom from Tolbert, then we're going to have to rely on Semi, who Owen was talking about a little bit earlier, and that's not going to be good for the Cowboys offense, who at this point right now is very suspect at best with their current situation before any games start.
I get that, but if you here, this is my thoughts on the matter. So, for better or for worse, whether you like the team or whether you like the offense or not, statistically they have been one of the better ones. So either it's been the weapons or it's been Dak, and either Dak makes his weapons or the weapons make Dak. And Semi out of Stanford, no one is seeing him play yet. So we're going to have to wait to see until he plays. But you and I both agree that Amari was mentally out of a handful of games.
Amari should have been gone 2 seasons ago.
Well, you couldn't, because just of his cap hit. Like when he signed his contract, they put in a cap, like that cap out like this past offseason. And that was so that you could cut him and save money, which is what they did with Gallup. It's smart because Gallup has an ACL injury, and if he doesn't turn out to be the person you want, then you can cut him in 2 years.
The Cowboys think a lot like me in that regard, as in they are always looking to replace what they have with someone who can do exactly what they are doing currently.
They are smart. I do think that Gallup is a lot better wide receiver than,
because we did technically have this conversation about Amari Cooper before last offseason. And I said the same exact thing, where I said Amari Cooper is tradable or get riddable. And you said the same thing that you're saying now. You can't trade him. You can't cut him. He is too reliable. If we lose him, we're going to be terrible. And he is now gone. And the offense is in a very peculiar position where they can be suspect early, but I think ultimately getting rid of Amari Cooper will help them long term, which I think is the most important for the team, because the Cowboys are not in a position to ultimately compete. They are a playoff team, but they are not a Super Bowl team. And Tolbert coming in, it allows Tolbert to grow. It allows CD to grow. It allows you to gauge what you have in Michael Gallup and whether or not you need to move on from him. And ultimately allows you to do all of these surveys and experiments and test your hypothesize. That doesn't make sense. Run experiments to ultimately figure out if you need to make some changes with one or two weapons on the team. I don't think Dak Prescott is going to be getting rid of. However, who knows? My consistent joke is Arch Manning 2025 or 2026, whichever one it is. But I think Dak Prescott will ultimately be the quarterback for the next 6-ish years, depending on his health. And we're going to go from there. But with Amari Cooper gone, it allows you to do a lot of testing and figuring out what you have on your team, and allows for players like CeeDee Lamb to turn into what you expect him to be, and him not playing as a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, I don't. Obviously, the best wide receiver, or the best potential wide receiver on this team is CD, but I do think that Gallup has a role, and I think that if there's one wide receiver that I'm confident in to like make a big play, it would be Gallup over CD. And that's just how personally I feel, especially being a third round pick out of Colorado State. I don't think that Gallup is a number one wide receiver. Well, he didn't show that last year when when Amari was down. But honestly, who knows? But I do think that even if he doesn't, here I'll do this. Gallup will probably not come back until week 8 or 9, maybe 10, and Tolbert can have his growing pains. But
do you see a scenario where if Tolbert is playing phenomenal and Semi is playing decent, do you see a scenario where Michael Gallup does not play as much as you expect him to play?
I do think that situation would have them rest him more and not rush him back and maybe extend him not playing until like week 11 or something.
Because if you're resting him because you are fine with what you have, that is telling exactly what I'm saying, which is Michael Gallup is good and he has exceeded expectations. However, he is replaceable and we have players who can do what he's been doing for our team.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that he did tear his knee and you don't.
And has had ankle problems and I think has had an Achilles issue.
I don't think it was ankle. He had a calf strain, which those two things, like you can't really, it's difficult to I don't know. I don't think that you can just like, there are some incidents or some like injuries where you can like fix and prevent, but I don't think you can prevent your ACL from being torn. I don't really know if you can prevent your calf from being strained.
We're very familiar in calf strains, aren't we?
Well, I get like I'm just I don't.
It was a joke. I mean, another player on the team had a calf strain as well.
Yeah, Dak did, and I think from what like the reports was that his calf strain was like as bad as Kevin Durant's was when Kevin
Durant tore his Achilles.
Well, didn't he have a calf strain though before? Because it was a calf strain that led to an Achilles, I believe. I might be wrong though, but completely off topic. But I do think that Gallup, if the scenario that you're saying plays out, I don't think that they would sit him because he's replaceable. I think they would just not rush him back, because if you rush him back and then he comes out and then he like re-tears it, that's not good. But I will make this bet with you. I do think that as soon as Gallup comes back, by that time Tolbert should have gone through his growing pains. I do think that the rest of the regular season going into the playoffs, if they make it, the Gallup will be more impactful than Jalen Tolbert. So I will say that. But moving on to, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, Ray, about that topic, we would like to move on to your favorite player on this team, what to expect from Rain Dakota Prescott in 2022-2023.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. If we are going, I want to just know what his exact stats were.
His exact stats were 11 or 12-5 with a playoff left.
Yes, he was 11-5, and he had a career best in completion percentage and had basically 4,500 yards. Had his second or his third lowest interceptions. Had his highest TD percentage and had the most touchdowns of his career. And that was with the calf strain.
Most touchdowns by a Cowboys quarterback in a season. Let's not give him his credit before we throw him in the fire.
I'm not going to. I think,
but I'm allowing you to give him his due,
his flowers,
before I ultimately throw him into the furnace.
Okay. I do think that
which is a little bit over the top. But
I do think that I'm gonna just say it. The reason why Dallas is where they are today is because of Dak. Because if you look at the team when he went down, because I remember we started, or you and I were having conversations when Dallas signed Andy Dalton, and you said repeatedly, Andy Dalton should start. Andy Dalton should start. Why isn't Andy Dalton starting? I'm not sure if that was like humorous or if that's how you actually felt. But as soon as Dak sadly went down, I remember that giant game and Andy Dalton came back, and I was like, oh my goodness, Ray's gonna be right. This man's basically gonna just win. He's gonna win the job, and then Dak's not gonna get re-signed, and everything's gonna happen. But Andy and also sidearm Danucci put Dak in the situation that he was getting paid, and it was the same thing that we saw in 2015. Romo was the team, and if Romo was injured, the team was horrible. If Romo was playing, Romo was always going to put them in a position to win. Sometimes he would lose you games, and I remember just great quarterback, but sometimes he was a little too gun happy. But I think that Dak's in the same category just based off of, if Dak doesn't play next year, you're looking at a top 10 pick team. And I feel like you could say that for every team. But if you put in the backup, I don't believe that what's his, I forget his name, number 10. I don't think Cooper Rush is going to be able to.
He is a 1-0 starter in the league. This is true. You must respect the man.
I don't think that
he has a game-winning drive on his resume.
I think that this team is going to go as far as Dak takes them. Dallas, before that game-winning drive against the Patriots, Dallas and Dak were looking really good. And then right after that is when you had the game against the Chiefs, against the Raiders, against all these upper echelon teams. And Dak at his best is not a running quarterback. He's a passing quarterback that can run around and be mobile and run if he needs to. What was Dak not doing because of his calf strain? Running. There were several times where 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, where Dak could run because he's not Ben Roethlisberger and he does not have a fridge on his back, and he could run. But what did he not do? Run, because of his calf. And I always got mad, but it never clicked because I didn't think that the calf was as bad as it was made out to. I didn't think that it was that bad. But you saw as him get healthy, he ran more and the things clicked. And yes, you had issues with CeeDee Lamb not knowing what left was and not knowing what up and down, left and right were. And you did have the offensive line be bad. You did have Zeke tear his PCL. You had a lot of issues which caused the team to disintegrate. You had coaching issues. You had a lot of issues. But I do think that if Dak has said repeatedly that he's healthy, and that this is, a lot of players say that this is just the best that he's felt, and that he feels a lot better about the offseason now than he did going into last year, just because of this month, so like 11 months or 13, I don't know math, all that, but the beginning of training camp, Dak basically injured his arm, and they had to ask the Texas Rangers how to fix it. He didn't practice at all. And then you had his calf strain. He went through a lot, and his body went through a lot last year, and he's finally healthy, which is why he didn't play in the Pro Bowl. And I loved it because if he went out there, he could have made everything worse. So I do think that Dak will – I don't think Dak's in a – Dak also hasn't had a wide receiver who's put up double-digit touchdown numbers, which is a little odd because he threw for 38 touchdowns, and you'd assume But I do think with a healthier Zeke, a better offensive line, another year of CD, better weapons that aren't going to just take themselves out of games, a better Dalton Schultz, a good Jake Ferguson who's better probably tight end than Blake Jarwin. And going back to that, you need him because they needed a second tight end. That is why they did that. I feel like when people talk about Dallas, they name Lyle Collins and Amari Cooper, but I don't think that anyone realizes that Lyle Collins got beat out by Terrence Steele and he was cut for a reason. So I think right tackle, they got better, more consistent based off of last year. And Amari wasn't, more often than not, Amari was just like a sitting duck. And I loved his personality. I loved what he did for the team in 2018, but he kind of took himself out of a lot of games. And it took a lot of stubbornness in me to realize that and all of that. And I will thank Ray for breaking through the stubborn wall that I put up. But I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but I do think that Dak, for better or for worse, if you hate him, love him, he is one of the better quarterbacks. He's not in like the S tier, but I do think that he's in the tier right under that. So he's a second tier guy, and he does have the qualities to be a number one, be in that top tier. He just has to be consistent. Like if he can do what he did for like if last year, if he didn't pull his calf, if he did that for the whole year, I do think that he would have been in some type of MVP consideration. But long story short, because I know Ray is just chomping at the bit for this, I do think that he will have a healthier year, a much better year. And I hope that the offense is more consistent overall due to all of the things that I just stated. So Ray, the floor is yours.
Well, there is some things that I disagree with. There's some things that I am flabbergasted about. And then there is a few things that I do actually agree with that you said. I will start with the things that we agree on.
So start with the bad. I want to finish off on a good note.
Okay. Yeah, I will change course. We will start with the flabbergasting aspect. Dak Prescott is not an A tier quarterback. He is a B tier quarterback. You have the S tier, and then you have the A tier. The S tier is the Mahomes, the Rodgers, the Bradys, the Josh Allens. And then you go down. I apologize if I'm forgetting somebody. It's just what happens.
Brady.
Well, Brady is up in the S tier.
Yeah.
And you go down to the A tier, and you have the Herberts, the Burrows, the Russell Wilsons. Somebody else is in there.
Stafford.
Stafford is A tier for sure. By the way, you're gonna see why Russell Wilson is an A tier quarterback. You can hate all you want, but Russell Wilson,
of course, if you're gonna put him with a better team,
he's going to a playoff team. The Broncos will go from the dysfunctional to playoffs in 1 year.
It's the same thing with Matthew Stafford going to the Rams. They're good quarterbacks, but of course, if you put them, that's the same reason why Brady stepped into the Buccaneers, because everyone knew they were a quarterback away. I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, of course, Russell Wilson, unless his injuries and unless that stuff was that bad, like, of course, they're going to.
Russell Wilson checked out with the Seattle Seahawks long before he was even. I'm not going to say the injury wasn't a reason, but he was not Russell Wilson last year. And I'm not going to drop him from A tier to D tier because of one bad year, when if you look at his long-term career stats, they are top 5, top 6 quarterback worthy stats. I'm not putting him in the S tier, but he is an A tier quarterback. Dak Prescott is in the B tier quarterbacks with Lamar Jackson with I don't even know who plays
Derek Carr,
Derek
I'd
Carr.
assume.
Derek Carr is
Kyler
in that tier.
Murray.
Kyler Murray is in that tier. Which Kyler Murray is Kyler Murray might not be a quarterback in the NFL for that much longer. But he is a good quarterback who when healthy does very positive things, but when injured he is not serviceable. But
The same
anyway,
for every quarterback.
you can be serviceable as a QB when injured. Look at Rodgers, look at Brady, look at Manning, look at the other Manning, look at Philip Rivers, look at I'm not going to say his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Tony Romo.
Even freaking Michael Vick, when injured, was serviceable sometimes. But anyway, Dak Prescott is a B quarterback. Why is he a B quarterback? Because he is a very consistent quarterback in the aspect that he's not going to do a lot to hurt you, but he's not going to do a whole lot to help you. Largely, the Dallas, I completely disagree with your take from the 2020 year. Andy Dalton did not do what I expected him to do, but I will not throw all the blame on Andy Dalton because if you recall, the defense of the Dallas Cowboys in 2020 was the worst defense almost in the NFL history. And that did not help. Dak Prescott came back last year to one of the top 5 defenses in pro football. And the reason why the Cowboys were able to stay afloat, even though they went 6-5 their last 11 games, was because of the defense. And the thing that really bothers me about Dak Prescott, and it has bothered me for 4 years now, is the fact that he bullies scrubs, and then teams bully him when they play him. And it's happened over and over and over and over again. Other than the Chargers game, and I guess you could say the Patriots game, because the Patriots did end up being a playoff team. However, they were atrocious. But those were 2 outliers. But other than that, he did not show up against the Chiefs. He did not show up against the Raiders. He sure as heck did not show up against the 49ers. And just had a lot of goose egg after goose egg after goose egg in his career. And all I ask from Dak Prescott is 2 words: show up. Because I don't want to see you throw for 400 yards and beat up on the Eagles, which you ultimately will. Throw for 400 yards and bully the Giants, which you ultimately will. Throw for 300 yards and bully Carson Wentz, which you ultimately will. I want to see you compete against the Rams and win. I want to see you compete against the Bengals and win. I want to see you compete against the Bucs and win. I want to see you compete against the Packers and win, which I think is the most reliable wishful thinking is beating the Packers considering their situation. But I do agree with the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are going to go as far as Dak takes them. However, he is good enough to get the team that he has right now with the defense and the offense that they have to 10 wins. But I don't see the Cowboys moving further than the first round, and that's why he is a B quarterback. So I think there are a lot of things that are not talked about when you talk about Dak Prescott. One of them, he is given way too many excuses. One being CeeDee Lamb is not doing his job, or he was hurt, which take it or leave it, may or may not have been more of an excuse than it, or more of a truthful as you think. But him not being able to run for a couple of yards is not a reason why to give him a pass, because he is a quarterback, not a running back. And really the only Stafford in those scenarios is going to throw. Aaron Rodgers in those scenarios, now a little bit older, is going to throw. Brady is sure as hell going to throw. Mahomes would probably run. Burrow would throw. Herbert would throw. Wilson now in his career would throw. So I don't want Dak Prescott to run. because running gets you into trouble as a quarterback. I'd rather him throw the ball. I want him to become a more pocket passer. I want him to get better in the pocket. Ultimately, I want to see him be more consistent against the quality football teams that the Cowboys are going to play. And like I said, and I believe our last episode, it's been a while since we've actually recorded, but I did say that what I'm looking for from Dak is that I want him to compete against the competent teams at the beginning of the year, because that's going to tell us what team the Cowboys are going to be in the postseason. Because if they drop every single game against the Rams, the Packers, the Bucks, the Bengals, we're gonna be sitting here week 14 and be like, the Cowboys are 12-4 or whatever, but they're also not a very good football team. So I do think that he's the best quarterback in his division. However, that's not very hard to do. But I expect a lot out of him, and it all comes down to the fact that I don't think he's shown up a lot in important times. He's shown up against the NFC East and the Jaguars. Actually, not the Jaguars, the bottom feeders of the league. But it's a lot harder to find a lot of games against quality teams other than the Seattle game. I will give you the Seattle game in the postseason. That's his one defining showing up in the when it counts game. I'll give you that one. But the Rams game the week prior, we can argue about that till the end of time, but I did not think he played very well in that game.
In the beginning he did, but then things unraveled.
I'll take your word because I don't really remember the quality details. I just remember one and very, very important play from that game that still drives me bananas to this day. But anyway, Dak Prescott is a B quarterback. But in order to reach the stratosphere that you place him to be in, he's going to have to be proved to be a lot more than serviceable against the playoff / Super Bowl contending football teams, which they will ultimately have the chance and the luck of the draw of playing this year. Short and sweet. I'm done.
That was bravo, sir. I will touch on that a little bit later, but I think this is a very good segue. I agree with some of the things you said. I also disagree on some of the things that you said, but I will get into that in a little bit. So I think that's a good segue into our next topic for the NFC East or NFC Least breakdown. I think the worst team in the division can be the Giants, just because of who their quarterback is. I think they're going to be a lot better, but third team's going to be the Commanders. Second, I have Dallas, and the first team, I have the Eagles. And that has nothing to do with the quarterback. That just has everything to do with,
you're treading a very dangerous rope right now.
I know. I think it's going to be close. I think both teams make the playoffs, but I do have the Eagles winning the division.
How exciting for the Eagles.
Very exciting. I just think that they're a better rushing team. Obviously, Jalen Hurts can go out there and throw 15 picks, and it'll be like it won't mean anything. But the Eagles' worst part of their team is their secondary by far. Their linebackers are. Everyone's saying that Nakobe Dean's like this great pick, and sure, but is he gonna play? Like, there's a reason why he fell. Like, smart teams like the Ravens could have taken him, but they didn't for some reason. And
the Ravens took another hurt player.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so there's some information that we're missing here. And sure, Dean can come in and be amazing, but there's a reason why he fell. Jordan Davis, I'm interested to see how much he's going to play because he didn't really play all that much at Georgia. A.J. Brown, I don't think – if he's healthy, he'll definitely be an upgrade. but I can go back and forth on who I'm gonna have in first place. But Ray, I know you already said what you think's gonna happen.
AJ Brown is an upgrade regarding if he's playing on one leg or has no hands. So let's get that out of the way. The slander that Owen has just spewed about AJ Brown is ridiculous. They had JJ Arceo-Whiteside running routes last year. They had practice squad guys running routes. They had Jalen Reagor, God forbid he ever steps on the football field ever again. And then they had Devontae Smith, who was serviceable and very helpful to their football team. But AJ Brown, like I said, can walk onto the field and have one arm tied behind his back and be more serviceable than Jalen Reagor. Okay. So I think that the Dallas Cowboys will win the division because the division is not very good. I do agree that the Giants will finish last in the division, and they will ultimately be in the running for a QB, and Daniel Jones will no longer be the quarterback for the New York Giants. Whether that is his fault or the team's fault, we don't really know because he has not been protected, and he's had pretty bottom feeder quality receivers who have either been hurt or have not lived up to their expectations. So we'll see if Daniel Jones is given another shot elsewhere, but I do think this will be his last season as the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. The Washington football team is an interesting one because I think that they are slept on a little bit more than they should, considering that while Carson Wentz was a disaster his last couple of games last year, he did have a completely rebirth year, in which case his interceptions were way down from the years prior, and he had a solid touchdown year. And I mean the Colts were the Colts were a pretty good football team that were a run first team.
He had a lot of crazy interceptions and throwing with his left hand. So there's definitely some really, really bad stats.
He had 7 picks. I believe it was 7. It could have been 9. But 9 interceptions is a lot fewer than 18 or whatever he had the year before.
You're right.
So the Washington Commanders football team they have an opportunity to finish third in the division at 9-8, which is interesting considering that the NFC East is considered as an atrocious division. But I could easily see the NFC East being Cowboys 12-5, Eagles 10-7, Washington 9-8, and Giants 3-14.
So 3-14.
So I have very similar order to you, but I have Cowboys winning the division at 12-5. Most of their losses coming to the playoff teams / Super Bowl teams that I listed earlier about 5 minutes ago.
Okay. So next, two more topics. And then we have one, the surprise. Mm-hmm. So my one hot take for the Dallas Cowboys is that DeMarcus Lawrence will lead the team in sacks with 10 plus. And
you have to give a number because you already said that Parsons is going to get 15.
No, I was just saying that because I was just saying that depends on like where he plays. But because going based off of the conversation with you and talking about where he can play, I was like, okay, the defensive line is much better than it was. Okay, here. Sorry. I take that back. I won't say lead, but I do think that he will get 10 plus sacks. Because he won't lead. Okay. I misspoke. He will get 10 plus sacks. And then my hot take for it would be the Broncos. I do not have the Broncos making the playoffs because of how stacked that division is.
All right. The Russell Wilson hate shows no bounds.
No, I don't think it's
no limits. But it's okay because ultimately one person will be right, and it
And
will
one
most
person is
likely be
wrong.
me.
Well, we shall see.
Just
We shall.
just kidding. Just
I'm
kidding. Like,
looking
yeah,
forward to your
one
hot
person will be
takes.
right and one person will be wrong.
This is true.
So, and now for the catalyst of today's show. My hot take is something that I did not expect to be talking about as my hot take. I had a completely different thing planned for this segment, but I had to change it due to some recent events and some recent tweets that I read on Twitter this morning while crying at work because I had to make a lot of phone calls. But anyway, I do not like when certain fans who will remain nameless, because there are a lot of, but this specific person embodies a lot of Cowboys fans around the world. And I used to be one of these people too, but I have grown out of this state of my fandom. They pick a player after a year and start comparing him to seasoned vets who do not deserve to be critiqued and compared to rookies or second year players, and are saying that Micah Parsons is going to be better or is a better fit or does more or has an opportunity to just be overall a better player after 1 year of experience. Now, Owen could easily say, well, Ray, you did a lot of that with Jamar Chase last year, which could be true. But I never said that Jamar Chase, I never compared him to Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams or give or take. Actually, I'm not going to compare him to him because he's old now. Who else is good in this league? Hopkins,
Justin
who
Jefferson.
didn't play very much. Justin Jefferson, who is now in that category because he did have backup his first year with the almost even better second year. So I don't like when you put Micah Parsons in the same pedestal as TJ Watt or Nick Bosa,
Garrett.
Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, because Micah Parsons, while he was phenomenal and incredible, has only played 1 year of football, and all these guys have played at least 3 years of football. And in order for you to be considered a top player and in a top 5 defensive player, which a lot of these players that I listed are at least top 10, you have to back up your first year with your second year. It's why we see players like really any wide receiver that you see go crazy his first year, or here's a good example: Blake Bortles. And his is a little bit different because his career took a little bit longer than 2 years to implode. But Blake Bortles was a competent quarterback his first year, or first even 2 years, and then his third year he was carried to the postseason by the defense. But ultimately, he was turned into he's a top 10, he's a top 8 quarterback, and then all of a sudden he turned into a top 31st quarterback. So it's very easy to put these players, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, insert player here, into he's top 5 at his position. He's top 5 in the defense in the league. But let's hold off on throwing Micah Parsons and with names like Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, etc., until he actually does the same thing, similar or more, his second year.
So, what is your hot take, sir? That he is not in their league?
He is not in their league.
Okay.
Yet.
I do agree, but I do think that some parts of the season he played as good or better. Some of his like weird stats, like pass or.
I mean, but there are times when Baker Mayfield played better than Aaron Rodgers last year, based on game by game. So
I'm not saying game by game. I'm just saying, like, yes, obviously, if he follows up this year with the exact same season as last, or picks it up, then yes, he will be in there. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of, like, after like 1 year putting, oh yeah, like he's here, unless it's quarterback, because quarterback is more difficult to play.
quarterback's really the only exception where if they go crazy their first year like Mahomes,
Yeah.
then you don't even need to see a third year from them.
Yeah.
You can throw them onto the top 20 out of the Hall of Fame based on 50 touchdowns and an MVP is technically a rookie. But my hot take for the NFL is a very interesting one, and it is not Zach Wilson. I was really tempted. I was really tempted to talk about Zach Wilson.
I was gonna say like
MVP
or something like that,
but I'm not going to. My hot take for this year for the NFL is that the Indianapolis Colts will represent the AFC. Will be one of the two teams playing in the AFC Championship game.
Wow.
Because Matt Ryan, while older and more deformed than Carson Wentz, makes a lot better decisions, is a better leader of men than Carson Wentz, and has proven to make solid plays. He did not choke. He was unfortunately led by his offensive coordinator to not throw the ball too much.
Okay.
But I think that he can get the job done with them relying on Jonathan Taylor to run teams into their graves, because the Indianapolis Colts will do something very similar to what they did last year, which is rely on Jonathan Taylor. And you can win football games with Matt Ryan being a game manager and needing to make plays when he needs to make plays. And he's in a lot different situation than he was in Atlanta, where his team was atrocious and it was bad. He doesn't need to throw for 5,000 yards. He doesn't even need to throw for 4,000 yards. If he can get you 3,600 yards with very minimum interceptions and 28 to 30 touchdowns, then the Colts will be in the AFC Championship game.
Okay. So my surprise that I've been hiding is that the 2022 quarterback rankings, according to listen. According to league executives, coaches, scouts, and players, was released. 1, Aaron Rodgers, which I highly disagree with.
MVP.
2, Patrick Mahomes. 3, Aaron Rodgers is 7-9 in his last 16 playoff games, I believe. 3, Josh Allen. 4, Tom Brady. 5, Joe Burrow. 6, Matthew Stafford. 7, Justin Herbert. 8, Russell Wilson. 9, Deshaun out for a year, Watson, and 10,
6 games,
Dakota Prescott.
I can deal with this ranking.
Okay, here is my thing. I want to say this, and then we can move on. A few years ago, when Deshaun Watson played against the Chiefs, and when they went up 21-0. I believe in my heart that if Dak lost that game to the Chiefs, every single podcast, would kill me. And I do not understand why he gets a pass. I understand that his team was terrible, but you have DeAndre Hopkins, you have a good defensive core with Clowney and Watt and good linebackers, and they had a few good corners. I don't understand why he gets a pass. Russell Wilson, don't understand. He's been injured. Justin Herbert has not touched a playoff game. Matthew Stafford was...
Nope. I can
say it.
Matthew Stafford went 3-0, beat Tom Brady, and won the Super Bowl.
1 year. I'm just saying
all it took was to take him out of Detroit and place him in a solid situation, and he won 3 straight playoff games in a Super Bowl.
Joe Burrow, fine. Tom
Super Bowl.
Brady, good. Josh
Super Bowl.
Allen, good. Patrick Mahomes should be number
MVP,
one.
Super Bowl.
Aaron Rodgers
Super Bowl MVP
played
4 times.
terrible against the San Francisco 49ers and should not be number one. That
Is Jimmy Garoppolo number one? Can we should put Jimmy Garoppolo at number one.
Yes.
Because Jimmy Garoppolo beat Dak Prescott, who I know you want to put top 5. And he beat Aaron Rodgers, who I know you want to put 10th.
No. If I'm going to do top 5, Patrick Mahomes.
Gosh, even after all that slander in the text messages that you talk about with Mahomes, that's a shocker.
I would do Mahomes, Brady, Allen, Rodgers, Burrow. And then 6, I would do Stafford. 7, I would do Herbert. 8. That's
who do you trust? Who do you trust more in a playoff game? Russell Wilson or Justin Herbert?
Oh, Justin Herbert, 100%.
Why? He's never touched the playoffs.
I know.
Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl ring and has beaten Aaron Rodgers. Hey, he beat Aaron Rodgers. He came back from 18 points down in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Do you think that Russell Wilson could do what Justin Herbert did against the Raiders? Where he went back and forth and threw pinpoints. I don't think Russell Wilson can do that. I think
Russell Wilson can throw moonshots where he chucks it very high and then it drops very perfectly into the hands of now Jerry Jeudy, formerly Tyler Lockett. And they will ultimately, the refs will do one of these. And Owen will do one of these. And then I will do one of these.
I really don't understand Watson because, sure, he was good when he played, but he hasn't played in over a year.
I will agree with you that Desean Watson should not be 6th.
No, sorry. He's number 9. He shouldn't even be on the list.
Desean Watson is, when he was playing, he put up top 5 numbers.
Yeah, numbers. What about his team? Because you told me you always tell me that numbers don't mean anything.
His team was suspect. His team was suspect, but he had competent weapons, and he was able to utilize his weapons effectively in order to win games.
You always tell me.
However, wait.
Waiting.
He does not deserve a pass for losing to the Chiefs. But he does not deserve all the blame for losing to the Chiefs. There was a lot of things that happened in that game that were not his fault. One being, for some reason, deciding to fake a punt inside your 15. Don't understand what decision that was. But the Chiefs are a very interesting team where if you give them any sort of momentum, you're done. It's over.
Yep.
So while Desean Watson should have at least been able to put up 14 points in the second half, which I believe he put none on the board. He is not at fault for blowing the game. However, he should not be on the list because he has not played in a year and most likely a year and a half, maybe even 2. So I would even be okay with not even ranking him until we figure out if he's actually going to play. Because why would you rank him anywhere on any list if he's not even going to touch the football field?
Yeah.
But I do think that he will be if he does play, he will be a better quarterback and a lot better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. He will win more games than Baker Mayfield. He will put up better numbers than Baker Mayfield. Definitely. Even though he's been throwing a lot of interceptions in practice, which is kind of funny, but also doesn't really matter. But it will make the AFC North a lot more difficult for Joe Burrow to win again. However, I do think he will win again. But yeah, I don't have very many problems with the list. I think that you could interchange the top 3 very easily, depending on who you hate, who you like. I'm going to go Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady, Allen, Burrow, Stafford, Wilson, Herbert, Dak, Carr as my top 10. Did I name 10 or 9?
I'm not 100% sure.
Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady, Allen, Burrow, Stafford, Wilson, Herbert, Dak, Carr. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. That is my top 10. So, breaking news, Ray puts Dak at 9 when the NFL or whoever released that list put Dak at 10. However, I do think Derek Carr is another hot take, which is not my official hot take. Derek Carr is a preseason MVP favorite.
I understand. I could see it.
But yeah.
Well, this has been our longest episode ever.
I think we've actually had a 2-hour episode before.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. This is Ray and I will definitely be recording more regularly.
At
Enjoy.
probably this time because we both work very long,
Yes,
extraneous,
sadly.
lovely days. And the only time we can record is at 11:22 my time and 12:22 Owen's time. So we are thriving, and both of us have to get up very early tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Well,
but yes, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We have gone through a lot. We've learned a little bit about sales. We've learned a little bit about rankings. We've learned a little bit about experiments and controlling our expectations. We've ultimately come a long way in these almost 2 hours. But the most important thing that I have taken away from this episode is that substance is important. And in order for the Cowboys to achieve substance, meaningful substance, aka Super Bowl, they're going to need meaningful substance out of their primetime players. And we've talked a lot about impacts and all that, but all it's really going to come down to is two things: the quarterback and the two quality key defensive players on their team. And that's going to determine whether or not the Cowboys are actually considered a threat to the NFL. That is my final point of the day. Evening.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode.
You can find us on Twitter at America's Team, capital P, capital C, and Ray has definitely been a little more active, which is a good thing. If any of you follow the Twitter or were looking, then you would have known his hot take before he even said it.
By active, I posted one tweet.
Yes, that is more active than usual.
I will post another tweet tomorrow. I promise.
Thank you for listening. It is crazy that we've been doing this for over a year and 34 episodes in. And in a week and a half, 2 weeks, we will be in training camp, which means that we will be recording more and more information.
We will have videos. We will have video evidence. We will see Ben DiNucci interceptions. We will see Micah Parsons lining up at wide receiver.
Trayvon Diggs at wide receiver.
We will see Trayvon Diggs hopefully not getting run by CeeDee Lamb, but it is a possibility. And we will see Mike McCarthy's lovely face. I'm looking forward to all of those things.
So much. Thank you for this great journey, and we're looking forward to recording more with school coming around the corner and having to go back, which means more time for Ray and I and more pain. But my name is Owen DeChico, and I am joined by
And I am Ray Nickens.
And this is the
All About America's
All
Team, brought
About
to you by
America's
Budweiser.
Team podcast brought to you by Delahanty Media. Enjoy the rest of your night, y'all.
And have a great week if you see this later on. Take care.
Oh, yeah.
Go Cowboys.